Welcome to the 40th episode of the See-Through Podcast, a weekly podcast that creates transparency on disabilities and the champions with them. I am your host, Lance Johnson, and I live, create, and podcast from Brooklyn, New York, with an inherited retinal disease called retinitis pigmentosa, or RP for short. And you may have heard and you may have noticed, but today marks the 40th episode of this podcast. I'm loving the growth that I'm seeing on this podcast, and I'm still loving the process of making this so you can keep planning on more and more episodes. So thank you. And just like how my episode numbers are climbing, my guest today does some climbing of her own. My guest today is Jill Wheatley. Jill is an adventurer whose ventures take her mountain running, peak climbing, ice climbing, and ski mountaineering. She is currently on a quest to climb Mount Manaslu, which is the world's 8th highest peak, and she does all of that after surviving a traumatic brain injury that left her severely visually impaired and also led her to 7 different hospitals in 3 different countries. In this episode, we talk about those hospitalizations. We talk about Jill's mission to release the shackles of stigma that traumatic brain injury, vision loss, eating disorders, and post-traumatic stress disorder can have a hold on, and how on her recent mountain experiences, she has developed an acceptance of her current situation and has found a newfound passion to shine a light on the power of perspective and possibility. Her story is going to take you on a journey, so I am so hyped to share this episode with everyone. And while I just hyped this episode up, I need a moment to hype this podcast up as well. So before you hear my conversation with Jill, please make sure to follow or subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you are currently listening on. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, do your boy a favor and rate the podcast or leave a review. And last but not least, make sure to follow the podcast on social media. The handle is at See-Through-Pod. There you will be able to access more content and future episodes, which I release every week. All right, it's time to deliver. Here's episode 40 with Jill Wheatley. I want to say good morning, but we're on completely different time zones. It's 9:30 in the morning for me. What time is it for you?
It is 7:25.
Wow. And that's PM.
Evening. Sorry. Yes. Evening. 1926. Yeah.
Where are you?
I am in Kathmandu, Nepal.
That's pretty far away from me.
It is pretty much the exact opposite side of the world.
That's amazing. And what brings you there?
Well, it was a stop when I was traveling in mountains around the world. So the mountains are definitely what drew me here. And it's the people that have definitely attracted me the most beautiful people and the most beautiful mountains in the world are here in Nepal.
Yeah. No, I imagine it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was looking at your Instagram, and you have just the photos on your feed are incredible. And that's kind of because you travel, like you said, you're kind of going from different countries and different specific mountains, and you're basically doing these kind of mountain adventures. You're climbing, you're running, skiing. Mm-hmm. Can you tell everyone about what you do, on these trips?
Sure. I actually don't really even consider it trips, really. It's just sort of one, it's the way life is right now.
Okay.
And currently I'm here in Nepal, and I've just come back from Kathmandu from Khumbu, which is the Everest region, where I was doing some training. I climbed and skied Mira Peak, which is just about 6,500 meters. I'm sorry, I don't know the feet. But anyway, I'm training to climb Manaslu, which is the world's 8th highest mountain. Just a couple years back, I actually ran around Manaslu in a mountain running race, 10-day stage race, and now I'm training to climb it. So hopefully the pandemic and works itself out, and Mother Nature opens her arms and welcomes us back safely, and I'll begin climbing hopefully at the end of August.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds fun. It sounds like the opposite of the lifestyle I have here in New York City.
It's really difficult for me to imagine the city. Very difficult.
Yeah, and then whenever I found you online, that's kind of what excited me is you have this wide array of activities you do. They all look very fun. They all look very exciting. They look kind of dangerous too, I'll be honest with you. And it just looks so adventurous. And the fact that you are visually impaired also adds another layer of dynamics to this. You are not completely blind, but you have a reduced field of vision, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So I have no vision on my right-hand side, and I can see from my left eye. I can't see above the horizon, and I can't move it laterally efficiently or properly. So totally, I have approximately 30% vision, all coming from my left eye.
Okay.
Yeah.
All from your left eye.
Yeah. So if you saw me, it's basically the simplest way to explain to listeners is that it's like my right is paralyzed. So I have no control over the movement, and it looks like I'm actually winking at you permanently.
Okay. Hey, a wink, that's friendly.
It is. And now I'm thankful to be at a place where I can actually make jokes about it. But for a long time after, this accident happened, I could not laugh about it. So there's definitely been progress made. And I choose to focus on the good and the vision that I do have rather than that 70% that we refer to that I don't have.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And you mentioned accident, and I'm aware of your story. You have quite an in-depth story, and it's full of ups and downs. And I am very excited to share your story with everyone, which is why I brought you on the podcast.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, because I think we just talked about what you're up to and kind of what you've been doing. And this kind of adventurous lifestyle of traveling the world and climbing mountains hasn't always been part of your routine, right?
That's right. Not always part of my story, no.
Yeah. So I kind of want to backtrack, and I want it to kind of maybe start at the beginning of, your story, and then see, maybe that'll help the listeners kind of get a full picture of you and who you are.
Okay. I'll try and keep it really quick and brief. I use the word accident very loosely and only just because it's sort of a simple common word, and I haven't come up with the exact, a perfect word. I say when I do use it, it's actually in reference to serendipity, because that being an occurrence of events that happen for a good reason or in a beneficial way, I do feel now that I would replace the word accident with sort of the serendipitous turn in my story. But just to back that up, I'm originally Canadian, and I was working as a health and sports science physical education teacher in Germany. When I wasn't teaching sport, I was coaching. And when I wasn't coaching, I was in the mountains running or cycling or skiing. So always very active. This was my second year in Germany after a number of international experiences teaching. And it was just a Wednesday that started just like any other. The second week of school, and 10th graders, so 16, 17-year-olds, about 20 of them from all around the world. And the day was quite gray to start. It was a little bit overcast, but I was keen, really, happy to go outside and be in the fresh air rather than in a gymnasium. And so my 10th graders and I were out, we got warmed up, and then it was our first day actually using baseball bats. And, the students were excited, as was I. We had a few lead up lessons, but this was the first day where we actually got to connect baseball and bat. So everybody was doing what they were supposed to be doing. We were broken off into 3 groups after our warm up. And the next thing I was on the ground. So one of my students completely accidentally, there's the word accident, unintentionally hit a ball. Basically, for those listeners that are familiar with baseball, he was sort of at the equivalent of home plate, and I was at the equivalent of third base, but this is like in a Bavarian farming field, so not quite perfect setup. Anyway, so he hit the ball and it actually connected with the right side of my skull. So just in front and above a little bit of my ear. And I knew that something was seriously wrong immediately, like that it knocked me to the ground. But just the teacher instinct in me, I wanted to try to stay calm, but I knew I needed help quickly. And so the next actually couple of weeks was sort of in and out my memory. In ways I feel like I can see this all happening, like from an eagle, looking down at the field. So I was taken to hospital. So the hard ball connected with my skull, and immediately my right eye closed. Students got the help they needed. I was taken to hospital and diagnosed after quite a brief examination. I remember green, like surgical blankets. I remember really bright lights, somebody being really close in my face, some questions. And then I remember being in my friend's car because he was driving me back to the farm where I lived by myself, and bringing me home because I was told I had a black eye and just go home and take it easy. There was something within me that just felt there was more to this than a black eye. But who was I to doubt or question a medical professional? I was just a sport teacher, a coach. And so I believed I had a black eye. And I was actually on my way that weekend to the World Long Distance Duathlon Championships in Switzerland. So trail running and bike riding. So I had been preparing for that. So I was quite fit at the time. And being told I only had a black eye, I thought, okay, I can still go. I can still run. I can still ride a bike. The eye will be fine. It's just a black eye. And so in my mind, that's what I would, I'm tough. I can do this. But then it was like in and out of consciousness. And then the vomiting started. And, my friends had left me because the doctors advised them I was okay. However, when my friend came the following evening, so basically like a day and a half later, and found me sort of unrecognizable, brought me quickly back to that same emergency room where very soon thereafter, I was put in an ambulance and rushed to a neurotrauma hospital.
Wow.
So that black eye has never reopened. And it was not just a black eye. It was, in fact, a cerebral fractures and a bleeding and swelling brain. So my skull was broken in two places, and my brain was bleeding and swelling while I was at home alone by myself, thinking that I was just needed to be a little bit more tough.
Yeah, so basically you were just doing your job and you were hit in the eye with the baseball and you knew something was wrong. Your natural instinct was something's wrong. You went to the doctor. They said it's just a black eye, and yeah. You were like, all right, I'll trust the doctor. And then you go home and then, the pain increases and your doubts probably shoot up, right? You're probably still not sold on what the doctor said, but you're probably trying to trust him because it might maybe ease some anxiety you're having about it. But then when your friend comes, your friend kind of sees it's not really, doesn't fit the description of what the doctor said. So
Correct.
Then you both reevaluate and you're like, all right, time to go back to the hospital.
There was actually no reevaluation. There was no discussion. It was like, we're going right now.
Yeah. Okay.
And just to clarify there, the ball actually didn't hit my eye at all. It just hit the side of my head. So like I was looking in the opposite direction, and it hit the right side of my head, not the eye at all.
Was it like the temple side of your head? It's just a skull.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now you're back in the hospital and you're with your friend.
Yeah.
And now you're going to get a second opinion?
Well, so this emergency room that I had originally was in, they sent me, I guess, seeing right away that they knew that there was a misdiagnosis, and got me to the specialized neurotrauma hospital, and the MRI right away showed the internal bleeding and the fractures. And so basically the next 4 months were on that neurosurgical unit. At first it was monitoring, making sure, monitoring the bleeding and swelling of the brain. That was priority. And the eye itself was actually given next to none, because it was just a sort of a, in the wave or the wake of the traumatic brain injury, and the bleeding was, okay, yeah, it's caused the eye to close, and the swelling and the bleeding in the eye, like my eyes were full of blood. So they thought and told me that my right eye would open again, and be fine once the blood cleared from my bleeding brain.
Okay.
And so they, said probably in 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks would come and they would push the goalpost, maybe 2 more weeks. And, with each push of the goalposts, Lance, like when someone tells you you're going to get this sort of reward on this day, and then it's going to be a little bit longer, or how lockdown is, it's going to be 2 more weeks, and people's hope, it starts to dwindle, or their sadness intensifies. And that's exactly what was happening. So with each push of the goalpost, my hope just dwindled and further until there was literally no hope left, and I couldn't see.
And how long was this period of time between when you were first initially injured, went to the hospital, sent home, and then all these follow-ups, and they kept pushing the goal? How long was this period of time?
Well, it was at the almost exactly 6 months after that I got an examination from a neuro-ophthalmologist. So that was going to another part of Germany for the specialized analysis. And so at 6 months it was, you're not going to get your vision back. And so, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. And, it was just like, because I guess even though I was really frustrated, there was still, disbelief, and certainly no acceptance whatsoever. And when I think about the cycle of acceptance and going from just being normal and then receiving this bad news, or the where the accident happened, and then there was just denial and confusion because I'm in Germany and the doctors are speaking different languages, so it was 6 months when I had this really kind doctor, sit down in front of me after a day, just endless tests, and sit down with me. I'll never forget. She just sat beside me like a friend, and her first words were, "I'm sorry." And it was just like, breaking that news. And when I think back to it now, when you hear of a death or a loss and someone has to tell you the news, it was like she was telling me, you're losing part of yourself. It's taken me a long time to realize that, and dealing with grief, we go through different stages of grief with loss. And for me, that was just the beginning. Yeah, that was sort of breaking the news that you're not going to get your sight back. And things went in a different direction, but further downhill from there. Because we referred earlier, about me living independently, an autonomous athlete coach in the middle of Bavaria, where I had, my stereotypical Subaru and my mountain bike and my road bike and my skis and my snowshoes, all of my mountain toys that could just be in my car. and I could drive, I could drive to Switzerland, I could drive to Germany, I could drive to Liechtenstein, France, and go and play. But now I couldn't do this. And so I literally thought, life's not worth living if I can't do that. Yeah, things got literally and figuratively very, very dark. And along with this, we haven't alluded to yet, but with the brain injury came the loss of appetite from the time of impact of the ball as well. And when I was at home, just very, very sick, vomiting, and it was like the ball knocked my appetite right out. So this entire time I was not being nourished and trying to recover from a brain injury. The brain requires a whole lot more fuel than I could have ever imagined before, or, ever believed. If any teacher ever told me that, you're studying, you need to take a break and have lunch and stuff. And I thought, well, nah, maybe if I'm going to go and run 50 kilometers, then I should eat something. But before, I never realized how much fuel the brain actually takes, and trying to recover, generally from fitness or, mental or physical, needs nourishment. But then when you're trying to heal a brain that's been traumatized, that's another layer. And unfortunately, the area of my brain that was impacted by the trauma also affects the appetite. And so, that was just another consequence of the traumatic brain injury. So that's development of the visual impairment, but then also an eating disorder, and then, all of the cognitive function, motor function, sensation and emotion, and PTSD. There's,
a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone would have the ability to kind of wrap their head or quickly around that,
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you had to deal with being like diagnosed and being told that, your vision in that eye is gone. And then also you're trying to heal from the brain injury, which kind of, as you described, knocked the appetite out of you.
Yeah.
And then so you're not eating, therefore your body's not able to have the energy it needs to maybe heal properly in terms of the brain injury. You're also
Correct.
feeling depressed because of this situation you're in, and you don't have your normal outlet of going out and, driving to somewhere you wanted to go, and as you described it, play, on and have these hikes or trips. And so you probably, it sounds like a lot of confusion, mental confusion, and it sounds like you lost hope there, and it sounds like you were depressed.
Absolutely. Yeah, I wouldn't admit it at the time. That the word depressed, I think at the time I would probably was too attached to the stigma with it. But when I actually found my medical team, so this happened in Germany, but we haven't got into the 7 different hospitals in 3 countries. So when I was eventually transferred to hospital in Colorado for specialized treatment, it was a doctor that made me, sort of, her empathy was real. And I just valued it so much because she approached it from grief. And she was the first person that used that word, grieving a loss. So there, where some could say, oh, she's just depressed. Well, when you think about, all that has come in the wake of my traumatic brain injury, and the loss, dealing with that grief, is a process that needs attention and it needs care. So I think it, I get, there's obviously different types of depression and different, like you said, outlets. Like before, if I was struggling, fitness was my main outlet, and I didn't have that anymore. So there was, there was just loss of hope. And I guess. And
grief is something that, I've touched on this podcast before with previous guests, and it's definitely a real thing. And it doesn't have to involve the death of someone close to you. It can involve kind of the removal of something close to you. As someone with RP, and my vision is kind of progressively, going to decline. Through each step in that journey, I'm going to have to reevaluate and kind of accept the vision loss, because it's once it's gone, it's gone. And sometimes that can be a weight on my back, to kind
Absolutely,
of, because
yeah.
the future's already scary,
True that.
when you throw that onto it. If I let it, I can really let it overwhelm me.
Absolutely.
And I still have, like, for someone with RP, I still have a substantial amount of central vision, and even with that amount of vision, I am still experiencing, grief of the vision loss I have lost. So I can relate and I can empathize, and I don't think that's something people should take lightly. I think, or feel ashamed of feeling grief of if they're either born with a disability or, through some sort of experience in the middle of their life become disabled. It's just part of that journey, and you got to explore it, and it takes a long time. And and it sounds like I would probably guess that you're still on that journey, but it sounds like you've came a long way.
Absolutely. I feel, for me, there's not an end point.
Yeah.
I just cope differently, but like I had mentioned, like, and you use the word acceptance as well, like it's not linear at all. And I don't feel like, some days you just 2 steps ahead, 1 step back. It's ever changing.
Yeah.
There's certainly days, that something might trigger, and I just feel more sad. Like every day is not pretty alpine pictures and perfect. And yeah, it's not a smooth cycle. There's denial, anger, depression, all of the parts of the cycle of acceptance that I just feel like, yeah, I've definitely progressed, but still, like, there's confusion and the what ifs come up every now and then. And I've come a long way.
Yeah. This story kind of has a great arc to it, if you think about it.
Yeah.
So back to where you were, you were mentioning that you had lost your appetite and you weren't really, your body wasn't getting the nutrition it needed. Can you kind of go into depth more about that and kind of the effects that had on your body?
Sure. That was something actually that took a long time to even talk about as well, but I speak very openly now. And again, with acceptance, it was another misdiagnosis. At the beginning, I was originally diagnosed with anorexia because I was just refusing to eat. Based on my negative experience with food following the accident. So when nausea set in and I was listless and just very, very sick, I just had this really, really strong aversion to food and aversion to all foods associated with the time of the trauma. So, during that season, it's, whether it be like everyone's eating corn right now because corn is in season, or it's strawberry season or cherry season. So any food associated sort of with that summer and the months leading up, I just had this like aversion. So I was really, really, again, the anger, because I was told I had anorexia, but I knew, and the stereotypical stigma around eating disorders and that being like a fragile female, or there's an obsession with thinness. And this was nothing, it was just, I just felt so disconnected from that and having this another label, like, okay, so they've given me this label of traumatic brain injury. They've given me this label of visually impaired. And now they're saying I'm anorexic. And, I can't use the language, but I was just so angry. But it wasn't until I got the expertise in Colorado when I was reassessed with respect to the eating. And I was actually diagnosed with avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. So it's an eating disorder that is, it's associated with trauma. And so, yeah, for many months, I was dependent on nasogastric and then gastrojejunal. So like feeding tubes going right into my abdomen first through my nose, and then it just got so severe that they needed to put food nutrition directly into my stomach, my intestine. So yeah, it took this like therapy, like relearning to eat, and this world renowned team, like literally the most renowned medical experts in the world are in Colorado, and it took them to stabilize me. Like I was so malnourished that, you know, all of the neurorehabilitation was put on hold because I could not benefit from it, because I was so malnourished, so underweight. My brain wasn't functioning properly because it wasn't being nourished. Never mind the fact that it was trying to recover from a brain injury. So yeah, in Colorado, they provided the life-saving medical stabilization and then weight restoration. And then they got me back on my feet. That was 7 months basically of just focusing on learning to eat and getting the nutrition that I need, and getting me from 3 days to live. You know, they that's what they gave me, to being able to walk out of that hospital by myself. Still.
Wow. They said you had 3 days to live?
That's right. Yeah. So I was in such a bad place, you know, psychologically, and again, partly the psychologically, just with everything that was going on, and not thinking that life was worth living. And these tubes that I refer to that were actually keeping me alive, I was trying to pull them out. And because I didn't want what at the time I was referring to it like fake nutrition. And, you know, I thought if I was meant to survive, I shouldn't need tubes keeping me alive. I shouldn't need medication. So yeah, I was a very, very difficult patient, a patient with no patience. I was not nice. I couldn't see that these people were trying to save my life, and that, you know, I needed those tubes and I needed the medication to survive. And I was refusing the medication. I was taking the tubes out because, you know, the vision, no one understood. I just felt no one could, you know, we use that word empathy. No one could see that I wasn't refusing to eat. I just could not get the food in. And so, yeah, it was that my medical team in Denver that really, you know, with their expertise and treatment to get me nourished, and to get the brain, you know, back on track.
Yeah.
And build that up. Yeah. So then I could do, you know, and then, you know, the eye was sort of, you know, the eye sort of took a back seat because, you know, we can't do anything with the eye if your brain's not working. And yeah, so complicated. And still, my relationship with food is not easy. It's a whole lot better than it was. But yeah, it's something I struggle with, but I talk openly about my eating disorder, and I think it should be talked about. Yeah, just the role that it plays, has played since the time of my accident, and yeah.
Yeah, that's
Sorry.
No. Yeah, appreciate you being so open here. So it sounds like, you know, part of kind of my perspective, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but so you're in the hospital, mm-hmm. You know, you said you were a difficult patient, you were pulling out tubes,
yeah,
and you thought you didn't need that nutrition.
Yeah.
It sounds like to me like it's like a combination of you wanting to have some sort of control over.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then also simultaneously you were depressed, and maybe were you having like, was it almost like suicidal a little bit, that you kind of didn't mind if you deteriorated?
Absolutely. On top of that, I won't go specifics, but I was trying to take my own life in other ways. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, just coming back to what I said before, I was, at that time, I was so focused on everything I couldn't do, all of the losses, you know, the 70% that I couldn't see, and everything that came, you know, from everything was all the negatives. That's all I could focus on at the time. And then I just felt so misunderstood. The misdiagnosis with the brain injury, and with my vision, and then with the eating disorder, I just felt, and then 7 hospitals in 3 countries. So from Germany, then they sent me to Canada, and then directly to the US. Like, I just felt like I was being tossed and nobody knew what to do with me. I just felt so alone. And it was just not worth, nobody understood. And at that time, I couldn't see that anyone was, trying to really wanted what their intentions were. For me at the time, everyone was against me.
Yeah.
But when in reality, I know better now.
Yeah, it's odd how kind of time can help you have this like overhead perspective on yourself and events.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that, to me, it makes sense that you felt that way, because that many hospitals, that many medical professionals, that many locations, and then no one seems to quite be able to like fully understand your specific situation, had to be incredibly frustrating. And and
you mentioned the word control. Like, it was like a craving, right? Like I craved what my normal was before the accident.
Yeah.
And then, just craving control. I wanted to know a timeline. When is the eye going to open? When am I going to get out of this hospital? When am I going to see this doctor? And when am I going to have tangible like changes? When's my appetite going to come back? And, I couldn't control what I was eating because, it wasn't up to me. And I just felt like I had no control. And, so with that was, just like you said, just deteriorating hope, and just so alone. The misdiagnosis and misunderstood. I just felt nobody got it.
Yeah.
So,
and during this time, like,
I'm done.
What were your like friends and family? What were they involved at all in while you were in the hospital or anything?
Yeah, it's tricky. And again, it's like, I feel so bad. I feel awful, like for the doctors, the medical team, the way I treated people, because at the time I just felt so misunderstood, and I didn't see that people were actually trying to help me. I did not want to be rescued. And I say that because I was, I've been away from Canada for so long. I knew, I'm in hospital. There's nothing anybody can do. Like, I don't want family jumping on a plane to come because, I'm angry at any noise. Like, I'm so oversensitive to noise, like losing my sense of vision. I just felt, and then on top of it, a major traumatic brain injury. I was so sensitive to noise. Like, I didn't want people around. I couldn't stand like the medical cart coming in. I would lose my mind because everything felt so noisy. Like, I didn't want people around at all. There were the most sweet heart, people who just wanted to help, and I didn't want them around. I didn't want my mom, my sister, family coming from Canada at all. And it was tough. Like, I put my family through hell for sure. And my brother actually in Canada stepped in, hopped on a plane when the neuro rehabilitation hospital in Germany basically, they were holding me because I couldn't do any treatment because I was so fragile, but they couldn't do the eating treatment, and no German eating disorder hospital or treatment center would take me because I didn't speak English, and my BMI, my body mass index, was too low for what they could accommodate. And so my brother got a call, essentially, your sister might not make it. And he got on a plane, literally. He had just had a baby. Well, his wife had just had a baby, and flew over and basically rescued me. Did as much as he could to get me into a treatment center in Canada. it's again, it's another layer of complication. I'm Canadian, but I'm not a resident. And so I don't have access to Canadian healthcare. And so no one was willing to take, my foreign insurance. And then again, because I was so fragile and my BMI was so low that they weren't willing to take me. But he was persistent and got me into a treatment center near where he lives. However, once I got there, it was clear to them, no, they couldn't. And so I was then flown to Colorado, where, like I said, I spent 7 months before. That was the end of the last 7 months of the 26 months in different hospitals.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
Yeah, your brother sounds like he really had a pivotal part in your story.
Absolutely. Yeah, I wouldn't be here without him. Yeah. So when I'm standing on top of a mountain, or when I'm going through tough times, it's thanks to him. And I mean, I know there's so many other people that wanted to help and tried to help, but my medical teams and these people that didn't give up on me. And I remember, when I was so sort of really on the brink of death, and my brother shouting that, you're not going to die on my watch. I remember it, of so much that I don't remember. I remember him standing at the end of my hospital bed shouting, because I just was giving up. I was refusing stuff. And now, just to think of what I put him through, I'm so, I feel so bad. So,
it's interesting how, having, loved ones near you during a traumatic time, you may not even want them there, but like subconsciously, and then eventually it leads to consciously, their energy and hope kind of starts to seep in, I think, and it can slowly give you life. Just the people around you can kind of tilt your head to a different perspective, change your perspective. It may be super slow, it may be quick, but I think the power of just like, I'll say love. I mean, that's, I'll say the power of love, there.
Yeah. Isn't that a song?
It's powerful. Yeah, it has to be a song.
It must.
Yeah.
No, and I see it now. Like I find myself, having learned so many lessons as so I've learned so much because of what's happened to me, because of my TBI. And now when I see, friends struggling, who are reluctant for help, I find it so difficult, when you want to help someone and they're not ready or not willing to accept help. I find it so difficult.
Because you've been there,
Yeah.
So
and with that, just like knowing, if I have friends or relatives who are going through a dark time, like whatever adversity, and just, and I think that's why part of the reason I've started to share my story, especially right now during these dark times that we find ourselves in. The pandemic is connecting us as humans. And even though, you or anyone might not be able to connect to traumatic brain injury, or, I mean, you can, Lance, like to vision loss, but it might not be a TBI, vision loss, eating disorder, PTSD, cognitive, it might not be that at all. But every human can connect to adversity in some way, whether it be illness or family or relationships, whatever it is. If anyone is ever in a place that close to where I was in terms of darkness and not wanting to wake up to see the light of day, if by sharing my story and my movement, my change from that dark place to where I am now, I am all in. Like I will talk about the hard stuff, because people connect to that. and it's real. And so, just I feel being authentic heightens connection. And, with that connection to adversity and human struggle, I just feel like that, that's, I may not be a classroom teacher or a sport teacher anymore, but I can teach others in terms of that, just that movement and that movement of from darkness to light and impermanence, that absolutely nothing stays the same forever. So,
yeah, that's beautifully said. And I really appreciate you sharing everything and opening up. And I think it's going to do a lot for a lot of people. So I definitely commend you on what you're doing. So yeah, and like I said at the beginning of the podcast, thanks for coming on. So after more than 2 years, 3 countries, 7 hospitals,
yeah,
you were eventually dropped off in Denver, and then
Denver airport,
the Denver airport, and that kind of begins, the next phase. It seems like your body weight's back up.
Yeah.
Has your brain fully healed at that point?
I mean, in terms of, it wasn't bleeding, but I wouldn't say I would definitely not say fully healed by any means. I think that's ongoing.
Sure.
But it was just so these conflicting emotions. I wouldn't say it at the time, but now, like, I was just so stoked to get out of hospital. Like, I went for months where I couldn't be left alone. Like, another human being was within 1 meter of me, for so long. Like, at night, I couldn't sleep without somebody right beside watching me.
Yeah.
I couldn't go to the toilet by myself. Like, it was so finally getting out of, getting dropped off at the airport, it was so, like, such relief. But at the same time, all this autonomy that I referred to before was lost. And I no longer had my apartment in Germany. I didn't have my residency in Germany. I didn't have my driver's license anymore. I had nowhere to go. So, my friends had emptied my apartment in Bavaria and took anything that I had. Like, I didn't have a lot, but, my bikes were sort of, my friend took my bikes and my skis. And I couldn't go back to Germany because my employer sponsored my work permit that allowed me to live there, but I couldn't do any of that anymore. So I couldn't actually go back. And then I didn't have residency in Canada. Like, literally, I can't get travel insurance or any insurance if you don't have residency somewhere. So there were just so many complications. And my bank thought that I was, like, doing something really sketchy. So they blocked all of my accounts. And It was just so much bureaucracy that was so overwhelming. And then there's the Jill that we referred to before, just wanting control. And there was still not a lot. I got a little bit back by getting out of hospital, but there was still so much that was out of my control. And so I'm walking out of Denver Hospital, just sort of conflicted. And then, with this body that feels, I'm not familiar with. I've been in a hospital setting for 26 months. I have 30% vision, or compared to when I went in, or, the last day my life was normal 2 years earlier, where I could see perfectly and I was riding my bike and running, and now I'm walking at a hospital, like, staggering, I'm not walking. I don't like the word normal, but I'm still adjusting to, the imbalances and the way, not only my vision, but the way my body changed as a result of all of the changes. So yeah, it was just mass confusion. And the only thing that I could really see, called me to mountains. And part of that, when you said earlier about being in New York City, oh my gosh, that like honestly, that's anxiety provoking. Like even just saying New York City, like I can't imagine. And people ask, well, why mountains? And I think at first it was a lot of that was my social anxiety, okay, with my vision and not wanting to be around people. Like I was still, I guess there's, very early still in that cycle of acceptance, I didn't want to be around people. For one, the physically, like, because I can't see anything on my right. And I was just really afraid of, or uncomfortable with people staring at me and, just trying to navigate around in an airport. Like it's just really, really overwhelming. And then the whole, like being in a city and, moving around, getting around, transportation. And so I think I just thought that mountains, were a place, there's very less potential for human interaction. And so, I just kind of still wanted to figure things out. I thought if I just go for a year and travel in mountains, then I will get this all figured out and everything will be fine. I will accept life just the way it is, but it didn't go quite that way. The first year was really just becoming familiar with myself again, not again, just becoming familiar with the way my body and mind had changed. And so I had set off for 13 massifs around the world for 1 year. And now last week was 4 years.
So that basically, that journey into the mountains, or that like natural pull towards, the outdoors and mountains that first year turned into what's now 4 years?
Yeah. So the first year, after that first year, it was like, okay, I'm just getting started.
Okay.
And that's only then did I start, because of the right people, connections, something sort of triggered I was able to start to shift my perspective to see how I can help others. And by sharing my story and sharing, the movement from darkness to light and what I have been through, that when I was able to see that, instead of keeping everything closed, when I actually connect with other people, how I can really help others, how I can open conversations, that are difficult. And I think, that it was after that first year where I started to write. I've always written in a journal, but to put my journal sort of into blogs, into writing, to publish like on a website. So it was after that first year that I sort of accepted the vulnerability and started The Mountains of My Mind, my website, and just then started to make more connections and recognize. And I still, as I progress and speak more, realize how I can help people and how I can still be a teacher despite no classroom or school walls.
Yeah. Your website has beautiful writing, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Love how you kind of lay everything out on your website. For those listening, if you want to check it out, it's mountainsofmymind.com, and it's a great website. It has Jill's full story, everything we're talking about here and more.
Yeah.
Everything's laid out in a very interesting way in terms of a timeline, and Jill, your writing is very descriptive, but it's also full of cool metaphors and whatnot that you kind of compare. And so it's definitely go check it out. It's a super cool website, mountainsofmymind.com. And then I'll also have a link in the show description, so just click the show description and I'll have a link there if you just want to click that and check it out. Okay, so that brings us to modern day. Would you agree?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
super compact.
Yeah. From year 1 to year 4, year 2 and 3, there's been a lot of running turned climbing turned skiing and lots in between. But I know for time, people want to check out the website or reach out. I'm happy to share, happy to talk more if I can help anyone. Please be in touch. Like you said, the metaphor of mountains and life's up and downs, and I've certainly lived lots of those, and I'm happy to share and talk more about it. Yeah, keep the conversations going. I think you, Lance, are doing a really good job of that. I feel like there's not enough talking, not too much, but, texting, but real conversation, I feel is a lost art, and we need to keep these conversations going. Like the tough stuff we talk about, you and me can connect to grief, and that's not something people are necessarily comfortable with. So I think it's important to keep talking and it's
the beauty of long form talks, to unpack everything in your story, in a minute. You're gonna miss a lot. So it's like
absolutely.
So Mountains of My Mind, I love the name, by the way, because it definitely ties into your story. And
thank you.
And there's a quote on the website that I really enjoyed, and I think it's kind of timely, since we kind of just walked through your timeline of your life. So and that quote is, "A story is only interesting because of what one overcomes and works through. So too is life." And I just like that quote, and you must like it too, since it's on your site.
I do. Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. It's like sometimes we don't want challenges. Sometimes we don't want to face tough obstacles, but sometimes we're faced with these obstacles and there's no way around it. It is what it is. And once we kind of, some time has moved by, and you're able to kind of reevaluate and look more in depth on what you've kind of learned from these obstacles and how you've grown based off of those obstacles. Sometimes you even impress yourself and surprise yourself about how maybe it even sparked a positive trajectory, a different trajectory, a different life that you didn't expect. But
absolutely, lessons,
one that you're still proud of, and one that you're still excited about. And let's just look at your extreme. There was one point in your life where you were so down that you didn't have much hope, and you didn't really see a life worth living. And then now you're out, and you have this new perspective, and not only that, but you're inspiring others, and you're living a fulfilling life. And it's an ongoing process of self-acceptance. It's an ongoing process of wrapping your mind around just life in general. But I think there's a lot of hope in just the fact that you went from that feeling of feeling no hope to your current lifestyle of projecting hope, and sharing hope, and hopeful message. So,
I like the way you put that. Thank you.
And, and so could you tell everyone real fast what you do, on these mountains that you travel to?
Well, there's definitely no day that looks the same. Every day is different. Like I said, right now I'm training to climb Manaslu. So that being over 8,000 meters. So right now, like typical mornings are spent like, meditation, yoga, and my journal. And then I'm off doing training. It might be long days in the mountains with a heavy pack, or it might be some trail running. Every day right now is different. Here in the Himalayas, it's monsoon, so I'm dodging rain, heavy rain. But generally sort of, if you looked at over the course of the year, it's, a combination of trail running, mountain running, hiking, because sometimes it's not really runnable. And then I've started ice climbing and skiing. Well, skiing is something I've done before, but I'm so thankful to have found the courage, because of others, to return to skiing in Switzerland the year before last, and then now here in the Himalayas. So a couple times a year now are big expeditions. So where I go off for a couple of months, to climb. And, so for example, the last big expedition was Amadablam, which is a very technical climb here in Khumbu near Everest. And basically it was 6 to 8 weeks of, you can't climb a mountain in a day. And just with respect to getting there, trekking there, and acclimatizing, it takes a long time. You got to go slow. So, between training for that and then doing these expeditions, and then in between, I'm working on my own writing, taking my journals and doing more reflective pieces, but now also trying to make time to connect with others like you. And also I've been doing, since the pandemic, I've been doing some school talks online, just trying again to share the message of impermanence and, the power of perspective and the power of possibility, despite vision loss and despite everything that's come in the wake of my traumatic brain injury. But just a message of impermanence and the shift, like I said, of perspective and my movement of shame, because originally, being in hospital, and then traveling that first year, really hiding, and then, my shift from that shame to embracing the power of vulnerability and the positivity that comes with being authentic and just sharing my trail from darkness to light, and how that light can ignite a spark in others, during these dark times.
Kind of how I look at it is, you found your mountains, your literal mountains, but you can help others, find what their mountain is.
Exactly. Yeah. For sure.
And speaking of, mountains, your Instagram has some beautiful photos, like we talked about earlier. So if you're listening and you want to check out Jill's Instagram, it's at Mountains of My Mind, but it's spelled MTNSOFMYMIND. And there you can see various photographs of Jill's journeys and adventures, and you can see videos of her skiing. And
I've got a friend who's a great photographer and a guide, so I have to give him credit. And the Himalayas make it pretty pictures.
Yeah, definitely. It's amazing photos on your feed. Yeah, and I think I'll end with this before we go into the nonprofit shout out that I do. But you're in the Himalayas, you're in all these beautiful locations. You have limited vision, but that doesn't prevent you from understanding the beauty of nature that you're surrounded with, right?
I'm not sure I'd be here without that. My connection with Mother Nature, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. Yeah, amazing.
Thank you.
So I like to end, each episode with, I let my guests give, a shout out to it could be a charity, it could be a nonprofit, or just any organization that they think was helpful to them or to others, And I was wondering if you had something in mind.
I have. I mean, there's many, but if just one, I would say a shout out to Eric Weinmeier, who's so inspiring to me, and his organization called No Barriers. And I know someone else on your podcast has also referenced it as well, but Eric just does amazing work being a completely blind adventurer himself and climbing the world's 7 highest summits. He's just a huge inspiration for me. And his foundation, the No Barriers, just creates opportunities for not only people like me, but people with other challenges, just to create opportunities for them to get into the outdoors and really live a no barriers life. So huge shout out to Eric and the No Barriers team.
Yeah, I believe my guest Anthony.
That's right.
Shouted them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're listening and you want to check out No Barriers and learn more about what they're doing, just click the show description. I'll have a link there that'll take you to their website. I'll also have a link to Jill's website, Mountains of My Mind. And anything else that I'm missing?
I don't think so. Well, there's the story, like you said, we both said we agree. It's so complex that, I just encourage people to reach out if there's any questions. And just one other thing with the Instagram photos or any photos on my website, social media at all, I just really encourage people to read the captions, because I really aim to use social media as an avenue to make connections, and that it's not just all about the pretty alpine pictures, and I just try to keep things really real. So
definitely,
do me a favor and read the captions.
Definitely. Yeah. You are a good writer.
Oh, thank you.
So Jill, I think I'm going to let you get back to your heavily adventurous life, and then I'm going to go back to my, city boy, New York life, and then maybe one day I'll be in the mountains, and then maybe one day you'll be in the city, and then it'll be the roles were reversed, but doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon.
You never know.
For me or you. But this was such a deep and wonderful conversation, and I'm very thankful that you spent the time to talk to me, and I look forward to everyone hearing this. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Lance.
Yeah, and I look forward to keeping in touch and staying in contact with you, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you.
All right, take care, Jill.
You too.
Yeah, and that's a wrap on episode 40 featuring Jill Wheatley. What an episode, what a story, what a journey. Make sure to give Jill a follow on social media. Click the show description. I'll have a link there that'll take you to her Instagram. I have a link there for her website. And then I also have a link there that will take you to the No Barriers website. And before you go, make sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you are listening on. Follow the podcast on social media. The handle is at @SeeThroughPod. If you want to contact me personally, you can DM me on social media, or you can email me at theseethroughpodcast@gmail.com. I want to thank everyone for listening. If you're new, just know that I release an episode every week, so make sure to tune back in. But that's it for this episode, and until next week's release, stay transparent, everyone.